As NAIDOC Week comes to a close, an influential academic has called for a comprehensive economic policy for Indigenous Australians. Professor Peter Yu is a Yawuru man from Broome in the Kimberley and the inaugural Vice President, First Nations at the Australian National University.
Professor Yu says he's convinced that to improve life outcomes for Indigenous people, a new, more equitable fiscal relationship is needed between government and First Nations people. Professor Yu joins us from Canberra. Good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Dan.
Professor Yu, tell me, what does a more equitable fiscal relationship between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and governments look like to you?
Well, I think what it means is that if you look at the current circumstances today, where over the last 60 years of public administration policy, we've actually failed quite dismally in terms of dealing with the ongoing poverty and marginalisation of Aboriginal communities throughout the country. But post, I guess, the 1976 Land Rights Act and the Mabo decision in '92, and with the Native Title Act, we've seen now accumulated asset base of something like 60+% across Australia nationally, and in the north it's something like 80+%. So, but unfortunately, there isn't the necessary kind of capital to help to activate those assets. We've seen that the current national Closing the Gap framework, which is largely a social deficit approach towards dealing with this ongoing marginalisation, has failed to actually close the gap, notwithstanding the very significant and important necessity to continue to fund that. But the only way future is for us to own our own risk and to actually look at a policy of shared risk and shared benefit. And that means how do we look at, I guess, in simple terms, the money story and how it isn't really engaging or getting Aboriginal people involved in the local and the regional and national economy. And that has to change significantly, because I don't think that anything we've tried to date has necessarily delivered anything of benefit or value, not just to Aboriginal people, but I think to the nation.
Professor, tell me about the First Nations Economic Empowerment Alliance and what you see as the role of clean energy transition as part of this broader platform of change you've been discussing.
Well, the Alliance has emerged out of fairly significant and detailed work over the last couple of years that we at the ANU have, through the International Symposium we held in 2022 and a subsequent 6-part seminar series focusing on the I guess, thematic areas about this lack of engagement in the economy and what are the things that need to be done. And the Alliance is made up of a number of senior Aboriginal leadership who have been involved in the economic space, with the Indigenous Land Corporation and the Indigenous Business Australia, of course, are two statutory organisations, but you do have the Clean Energy Indigenous First Nations Clean Energy Network and the First Australians Capital, and Terry Jenke, who is global expert on Indigenous intellectual property rights. And the work of the Alliance really is to try and it emerged as a community of interest, I suppose, from the processes of the engagement. We've interrogated very seriously the nature of the factual situation, and so we're taking very much an evidence-based approach to this, and suggest that the only way forward really, and I mean, I guess, for example, now if we're talking about the nature of moving from the debate about climate change to renewables, 80% of that activity in terms of critical minerals is going to happen on Aboriginal land, and I don't think we can allow the kind of very poor agreements that were there historically to continue. I think this is a great opportunity for us to draw a line in the sand where Aboriginal people can get engaged in wealth creation, not just being part of the I guess wealth distribution through the various kind of welfare programs that are currently there. So it's about us owning the risk and taking this forward so that we can develop a greater positioning and equity in various industries that contribute to the growth of the economy and the prosperity of the country.
And Professor, the Shadow Indigenous Australians spokesperson, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, has also been speaking about doing things differently to change outcomes, and she's calling for a second way, an advancement movement, saying that those on welfare should be doing jobs in their communities rather than by fly-in, fly-out workers. The Senator says that this is real reconciliation and integration. What do you make of Senator Price's proposals?
I think certainly if, the focus has been on jobs historically, and that's important, training, skilling and jobs, obviously critically important towards helping to build that, but it is one component of the broader ability to engage for the government to advance a fiscal policy proposal. I think that largely, so I wouldn't necessarily disagree that basically getting jobs is important, but I think it's not the only way. That's traditionally been the way that governments have seen economic policy dealing with Aboriginal people. But I don't think that one would hope that this is a bipartisan approach, that we're not driven by the nature of the political or ideological positioning, because I don't think that will change anything. The reality is that what we're seeing around the country is as a result of our continued economic marginal position and our inability to do things for ourselves, given the, the irony of it all is the nature of segregation is caused by the codependency, largely disempowering Aboriginal people from being involved in the economy. And I think that that's where it's got to fundamentally change.
Professor Yu Yarrow Mann, an inaugural Vice President First Nations at the Australian National University, thank you for your company this morning.
Thanks, Dan.